怎么回事？再探再报，妹走れ！
Gacha games are seemingly a dime a dozen these days, with every iteration of the open world formula being peddled around by content creators and gamers alike as the next Genshin killer. This certainly does a few things to harm the incoming games. One, being compared to one of the most monumentally successful games of its type in the West, an impossible and basically worthless comparison in most cases. And two, this continues to fuel the flame of tribalism and the idea that if you play one game, you cannot be curious or interested in another of its kind, or so the internet would have you think is the case. Kuro Games launched 1.0 in the middle of 2024, closely on the heels of its CBT2 beta test, which ultimately fell pretty flat. A launch of any new game is an incredibly delicate process, but the launch of a gacha game where audiences tend to be extremely harsh and deeply entrenched in preconceived notions and opinions is a near deadly one. Plenty of games have come out since Genshin's rise to fame that have been quickly snuffed out and altogether forgotten. That the risk involved on having a bad launch can be nearly catastrophic for a company if it's too similar to the king of the anime gacha space. Well, I played the personally highly anticipated launch of Wuthering Waves for myself, and ultimately landed on the idea that it was a good game that had enormous potential, but felt disappointing in its offerings. When it came to story and music especially, exploration, its ecosystem, and especially the combat has never left me with a sour feeling. And in fact, I have quite enjoyed all of these features quite a bit ever since the original 1.0 release, and have played it consistently over the last 7 months. The music overall felt all over the place and with no particular sense of direction, and was a far cry from the melodically driven and powerful pieces of Kuro Games' first offering, Punishing Grey Raven, a game with music I enjoyed so much that I actually discovered a love for EDM that I didn't even know I had. 1.0 felt unfinished, rushed, and generic, with its somewhat muted colors, vast open spaces with not much to actually see that didn't feel kind of bland and samey, and music that ultimately wasn't bad, was just incredibly forgettable. Beyond these complaints, the gacha system, always a sticking point in these types of games, followed the tried and true formula of its rival in the space, offering up the 50-50 for characters instead of its previous PGR system of just needing to reach the hard cap of however many pulls it is, which felt more player-friendly and altogether more generous. That said, the weapon banner was guaranteed at 80 pulls max, and Kuro has continued its player-forward model of making it fairly easy to accrue the necessary in-game currency in order to properly pull for characters as a free-to-play player. One I am not, but based on my conversations with free-to-play players, most have been pleased with their ability to play the game and receive characters they want even when losing the 50-50. I know it's unrealistic and not financially lucrative for these types of games, but having the 50-50 player-unfriendly system go away while retaining the gacha component is something I hope to see as these games continue to dominate the market with their popularity. It's unlikely, but a man can dream. What was really surprising, though, came in subsequent patches that occurred pretty rapidly. Sure, yes, there was some filler in the 1.0 patches, but 1.1 brought with it Mount Firmament, new characters with Jinshi and Changli, and a whole new area with its own system and mechanics to unravel and discover. This was a welcome surprise for many of us who were committed to supporting and playing Wuthering Waves. The music improved, and had a really lovely overarching melody that was memorable, if not a bit too simple, with just the melody as the dominant aspect of the music, but it also brought real highs and lows for what quickly became a fan-favorite character, with Jinshi, and the challenges of being a Sentinel's Resonator. And then finally, later on in the 1.0 patches, we went to the Black Shores. Another, in my opinion, colossal victory for the continued vision of what Wuthering Waves was wanting to become. New, terrific, compelling characters, improvements to dialogue, character interaction, and the general quality of life became very high. It felt that Kuro Games was actively listening to player feedback and taking it seriously, rather than just trying to make as much money as possible. Admittedly, there was still, a bit of a wow factor that was missing. Sure, the worlds were visually stunning, and there were some incredible set pieces, but it still didn't have the thing that makes you want to come back day after day to live in and experience the world, at least generally speaking, and certainly for myself. Music as well was really starting to turn a corner and becoming less and less meandering, without any specific intention. This patch also focused a lot on sound quality that was reminiscent of Nier, which if you played those games, you can understand why that is a compliment of very high praise. These patches also felt to me like the beginning of a time period where it really felt like the game was trying to deviate from the many parallels to the big bad Genshin Impact. And it felt like while it may have taken some inspiration or direct inspiration from it, directly or indirectly, there was a vision and a desire to tell its own story. Sure, yes, that tribalism I mentioned earlier will probably never go away, and is incredibly annoying and stupid and redundant, and the infighting will continue for the foreseeable future, especially with an at times disgruntled fanbase who feels like they're not being heard, but at least Wuthering Waves was starting to feel like a structured game with an idea of what it wanted to be. That takes us to today, and I have to say, the ridiculously successful Wuthering Waves 2.0 update, and ultimately the point of this video. So has Wuthering Waves managed to actually make waves? Yes, astonishingly. For the first time, the game truly feels like it has its own identity, free of the confines of previous comparisons to the other game in the market of this level. Has Wuthering Waves music improved its music? When I tell you it's basically a miracle, I cannot understate enough how good the music in this update actually is. Everywhere you turn, there is a new surprise to witness and hear. Whether it's a side quest you could accidentally miss by not veering off the road most traveled, or stumbling on ancient ruins. The game has music in spades, not only that fits the narrative, but also elevates the narrative to the point that repeat listening in your car would also be delightful. It moves beyond the game. When we take a soundtrack and move away from the game with it, that's when a soundtrack is truly victorious, and that would ultimately be the best way for me to describe the soundtrack. Victorious. A victory. 4 tracks in particular really stand out to me. The track Within the Church of the Order of the Deep, welcoming us with this sound of hallowed ground where every step you take is sacred, where we're led to believe that the majesty of the Sentinel is with us at every corner. Sharp, incredible horns announcing our arrival with stunning 4-part harmonies in the voices that is reminiscent of the Gregorian chant or a song you might literally hear in a Catholic church today, The Century Construct, the closest track I've heard to Kuro's sister game, Punishing Grey Raven, with frenetic rhythms, terrific womp-womps, and a fusion of classical and baroque that is a rare delight to hear mixed in with electronic music while also featuring string quartet and harpsichord. The opening to the vast openness of the Raguna countryside, a track with rights bought by Kuro Games called A Fairy Tale that sounds more befitting of a Witcher 3 intro or Freerun than any other game I've played within the gacha space, that invites us into exploration and wonder with gentle vocals that provide us with curiosity and even warm our hearts to the warm hues of green and brown we experience in the countryside. The Lorelei boss fight, with echoes and references to Mozart's The Magic Flute, a reimagining of a timeless song that will have cultural implications far deeper than one can even begin to consider, exposing millions of people to the power of opera as a musical medium, and that elicited this outrageous reaction out of me, a former professional opera singer. Wow, that's cool. Oh my god! Oh my god! No fucking way! Holy shit! Oh my god! They referenced Queen of the Night! And lastly, the menacing Elden Ring style FromSoft approach to the Dirge Dragon, whose size alone makes it a terrifying foe, story reasons not mentioned for the spoilers. Harpsichord and strong male choir dominate this track as we step into a dark baroque horrorscape of terror and destruction. These tracks are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the variety on display here. Day and night tracks, a world quest with dynamic music featuring a truly modern twist on baroque music. It shifts into a combat version incredibly smoothly and then resets back. Dynamic music. The music on display is a masterclass in guiding players emotionally in a direction and letting them feel whatever the intended purpose or setting of an area may have been during the game design creation process. It's a huge win. If 1.0 was disappointing, then 2.0 is a complete reversal and a total triumph musically. And I cannot help but recommend it to you for the music alone. More than anything, this game feels like a game first and a gacha game second. Oftentimes in this style of game, there can be a sense that the purpose of doing things around the world is ultimately to get you to keep going, to keep opening those gacha tabs, and spend those in-game currencies, or better yet, swipe your credit card. But in the case of WUWA 2.0, it doesn't feel this way in the slightest. Sure, it's there, but it feels like this game wants to be a Witcher, or a Red Dead, but in anime format. It wants you to explore its world, see what it has to discover, and in a way, it lends itself to an MMORPG experience, kind of. Not dissimilar to the wonderment and curiosity that a game like Guild Wars 2 can provide, where the world is yours to find and uncover, and who knows what you might see. In fighting between enemy factions? Sure. Old ruins that harbor a dark secret? You got that. A flying minigame where you're actually high as a kite and suddenly you're flying with a boss from earlier in the game? Why not? There's spectacle everywhere throughout the landscape, and the landscape is aching to be discovered. Flight was also something that was recently introduced as sort of gliding mechanic, and it is an incredible showcase of Kuro Games wanting to make something unique and its own. Traversal has always been something really important to these devs, and clearly this is the ultimate form of that, though I wonder what else they have in store for us for future expansions. Flying is the pinnacle way to get from point A to point B, and the more you explore the regions, the more you're rewarded with stamina that allows you to fly further and longer, allowing you even more time to bask in the majesty of this incredibly inviting and well-designed world. As I mentioned, the world is layered in such a way that the mind can't help but want to see what's under the clouds or over the horizon. There is so much to see and explore and come across naturally. But if you want, Kuro Games has also made the process easier by giving you easy ways to proceed right to where you want to go, saving you time and allowing you to get what you want to get done quickly and efficiently if you don't have a lot of time on your hands. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this story, but it's also really good. I gotta say, I am so tired of every gacha game having these convoluted phrases or terms that I have to remember, and then having a character repeat themselves 30 times or rehash what we just experienced, or go on a 40-minute long monologue about stuff that is so in the weeds that you'd need a PhD just to understand it. In the case of 2.0 story, it's pretty on the nose. There are some pacing issues, mostly in some NPC interactions at the beginning as the world building starts, and especially in some exchanges with adjacent characters that could be shorter in the back half of Act 2. But overall, I was locked in for the full 10 hours I spent with the 2.0 story. I found it intriguing, maybe a bit predictable, but overall, when it ended for this update, I didn't want it to end. That's personally how I know it's good, per my standards. The companion quest with Carlotta, on the other hand, was by far the longest of the companion story quests we've had, and while I felt the beginning 30 minutes were way too much back and forth to areas and conversations with people that you kind of don't really know or care about, it was actually a really satisfying conclusion that felt we really had arrived and learned more about her. With some ever so slightly tighter scenes, I think we would have had ourselves a near perfect story experience. In total, I would say the story experience landed around an 8.5 out of 10 if we combine the main story, Carlotta's story, and some of the world quests. This is another point I should make, is that everything that happens after the main story in the world and Carlotta quest just feel naturally good because they feel like a continuation of the 2.0 story. So these world quests or companion quests, which oftentimes could feel like filler a lot of the time, actually fill some really nice gaps for characters' motivations. And they drip feed just a bit more about the world to satiate while we wait for the continuation of story events, which I expect to be highly compelling. Wuthering Waves is in a phenomenal spot right now, deriving quality game-first content and providing challenge in combat, though it would be nice to have a difficulty slider or up the difficulty a bit for story bosses as they are entirely too easy. I think this is a solid game and a genuinely good time. The course correction in 7 months since 1.0 is monumental and should be praised and praised loudly. And I can't help but say that I feel that if you're not into gacha games, which I doubt you're watching this video, or have been on the fence on trying Wuthering Waves, now is absolutely the time. This is the kind of turnaround we saw with Final Fantasy: A Realm Reborn, Cyberpunk 2077, or No Man's Sky. It may never land at a true AAA experience, or whatever that means for you, but I think if you go in with a level head with gacha aspects, or don't interact with them at all, you'll come away with a game that respects your time, engages you, and might even move you. It's very good. Wuthering Waves has done the seemingly impossible, and I cannot recommend it enough to you or anyone who might be interested in getting stuck into a beautiful world with delightful characters without being too bright or peppy. If you're looking for a new game, this very well could be the one for you. And while nothing is perfect, I do believe they really knocked it out of the park with this one, and they just need to keep that up for the remainder of the time that they make this game. Take care.